Your eyes snap open to darkness that isn't silent. Somewhere beyond the reed wall, sandals scuff dust. A clay pot thunks against another. The low animal groan of a tethered ox folds into the breathy drone of wind crossing mudbrick. Dawn is a rumor, a thin band of pewter light sliding between wall and door curtain. You're not in your bed, you're in the first city. You've been sleeping on a reed mat, the kind that remembers your bones. It tattooed your back with a grid so perfect you could use it to measure barley. Your throat is sand. Your tongue peels from the roof of your mouth like wet clay from a mold. You reach for the water, charcoal, terracotta, sweating against your palm and let a mouthful slip across your tongue. It tastes like earth and metal and relief. The floor is packed dirt, polished by 1,000 barefoot mornings. You know this courtyard by feel, the hearth pit to your left, the low amphora to your right, the rectangle of sky overhead. It's a square of color that shifts from slate to bruised lavender, while the air thickens into heat. In an hour, the whole house will bake. For now, the world holds its breath, and you can hear the city beginning. A woman calls to a child in a language that will someday be dust on a museum placard. The answer is laughter. A boy runs past your doorway with a bundle of onions and the specific pride of someone trusted with something that matters. Onions matter here. So does barley. So does water, the god everyone worships, even when they think they're talking to someone else. Hey, quick thing. Your voice is low. You're not scaring the neighbors. If you listen to these deep dives, tap like and subscribe, and tell me this. What city you're in and what time you hit play. Somewhere in Ohio, it's coffee o'clock. In Karachi, it's late night scroll. In London, it's toast, crumbs, and headlines. Wild, right? Time zones are just Sumerian math with better branding. You stand. Your knees complain in a language older than writing. Your clothes are rectangles of linen and intense scratchy, sun-bleached, belted with woven cord. Outside, the alley is barely wider than your outstretched arms. It channels, smells like a flute, channels air, dust, smoke, clay, sweat, and that sweet, yeasty ribbon that means bread is happening somewhere nearby. Your stomach answers with a small, treacherous sound. There's a thud, like a heartbeat amplified, the gong from the temple precinct. Everyone hears it. Everyone knows what it means. The gods will be fed. The canals will be mended. The day will be survived. Step into the street, and the city reveals itself, one corner at a time. The way a story reveals its twist just after you hoped it wouldn't. The houses are anonymous from the outside, blank walls. High doors, tiny vents, that's by design. Privacy is a fortification. Light and life happen in courtyards, not windows. The lanes funnel you toward, the spine roads that push, straight to the ziggurat heaving, up from the city's center like a stepped mountain. Someone dared the horizon to ignore you. Pass a shrine tucked into an external wall, clay goddess with wide eyes and hands cupped for offerings. Someone left bread. Someone else left beer in a cup where flies already own shares. Across the lane, a girl is beating a tunic against a river-worn stone and humming a melody so old, you suspect it's carved into the bones of the place. She grins when she sees you, notice, the same way a kid grins after dunking on a mini-hoop. Human is human even when it's 3000 BC. The overseer is ahead where the lane opens into a square. He's got a shaved head, a copper torque, and a voice that can cut through a sandstorm. He points with a stylus that isn't for writing today. It's for assigning reality. You join the canal crew because this city doesn't exist without the arteries that keep it alive. And you can't not exist, not today. The Tigris and Euphrates are visible from the ramparts on a clear afternoon. And the stories they tell depend on how much they rained in the mountains weeks ago. They're moody rivers. Egypt got predictability with its Nile like a clock that loved you back. Sumer got dice. So Sumer answered with systems. You find a shovel polished by hands. You'll never meet and step into a cut where silt slept all night and refused to leave. Work is simple in the way endurance sports are simple. You know exactly what to do. It's your ability to keep choosing it that's complicated. Scoop, lift, dump. Scoop, lift, dump. Heat climbs your spine like a lizard and settles at the base of your skull. Sweat paints salt maps on your forearms. Someone starts a work song with a Caland response older than regret. Water to field. Field to bread. Bread to body. Body to God. It's corny until the rhythm saves you. Hours later, the gong breathes again, and the overseer waves you toward shade that is a suggestion more than a physics phenomenon. A boy passes a clay dipper. The water is warm, but your cells don't care. You tip it back, and the world refocuses by a single click, like a camera lens that decides to be kind. Lunch is barley again, and always. Flatbread, hot enough to burn your fingers. Slapped to the inside of a communal oven, and pulled free with a little char, like a signature. Onions sliced with speed and a chipped blade. A shallow cup of beer, thrumming with life. Thick, sweet, not a party so much as drinkable bread. You share a reed straw with 3 strangers, and maybe you're making a memory, or maybe you're making herd immunity. Either way, you're alive. Look up. The ziggurat. You've seen its picture in textbooks, the stepped pyramid. Drowned in desert light, but standing at its base is like standing at the foot of a decision. Stay small or climb. It's not just religion. It's archive, court, storehouse, hospital, business school, DMV, and HR department with incense and better branding. Power lives here because accounting lives here, and whoever counts the grain owns tomorrow. Priests move like they know the path you'll take before you do. Scribes scratch wedge marks into damp clay with a reed stylus, snipped at a cunning angle. The script looks like little birds decided to walk across mud and leave their geometry behind. You ask what a tablet says, pretending you're making conversation and not auditioning for a different life. The scribe reads without looking down. Donations of barley to the temple of Inanna, entered and balanced. He doesn't smile. He doesn't have to. He holds a luxury everyone recognizes. Literacy is shade at noon. Afternoon work assignment, transport. Offerings up the stairway that pulls toward the platform where only the high priest crosses the last threshold. You shoulder a basket of dates and step onto the first riser. Each step is tall enough to make your thighs name their price. Below you, the city spreads in a grid of roof lines and smoke threads and human systems, barely holding against a world that hasn't learned to forgive yet. Above you, a temple painted the color of skyweights. Like a rumor you want to believe. On level 2, you pass a boy reciting signs in a dry whisper as a teacher wraps a stick against his knuckles to correct his pen grip. Education hurts here. It also saves. On level 3, a musician tunes a lyre for evening rites, plucking intervals that glide past your shoulder and stay. On level 4, a priest with oil on his brow inspects a lamb that will not see the sunset. You deliver the dates to a woman with calm hands. For Inanna, she says, but you watch her inventory them like a shopkeeper. The gods consume by proxy. The poor consume if there's surplus. The temple consumes with a plan. When the sun slants toward mercy and the hottest hour loosens its teeth, the courtyard fills again. The high priest appears wrapped in a textile so fine your fingers itch. He raises both hands, and the murmuring falls as if someone pressed stop on a crowd. He thanks the gods for water and threatens them with better offerings if they scare up a plague. He announces a festival date you won't remember, and a canal extension you will. The work never ends. That's the job description for civilization. You head home along lanes that learned to glow. Even Mudbrick remembers sunlight. Kids chase a spinning hoop and argue about rules. A potter holds up a new jar, taps it with his knuckle, and listens for that perfect ring. To men barter barley for fish for longer than the fish deserves. You duck into your doorway, find your household gathered like a sentence around a verb. Dinner. More barley, lentils, fish grilled hard and split down the backbone with a practiced thumb. Someone tells a story you've heard so often you could lip-sync it, about how a god warned a man to build a boat. And everyone pretends the ending surprises them, because that's how community works. Later, lying on your mat beneath a sky so crowded with stars, you understand worship as reflex. You make a note to your modern self. Next time your Wi-Fi lags, remember you once had to beg a dessert not to kill you. Remember the first city had no word for weekend. Remember that math, law, city planning, and the idea of school were forged here because improvising with chaos will gift you either a poem or a ruin. Sumer chose both and called it Tuesday. Fade to black. The gong waits for morning. Next episode, what it actually costs to keep a city alive. When your rivers move like snakes and your neighbor thinks your water is his birthright. Also, donkey-powered war chariots you'll try not to laugh at. You'll fail, asterisk. The miracle isn't the ziggurat. It's the ditch, not a romantic miracle. Not the kind you carve on a cylinder seal and brag about in song, but look directly at it, because this is where we start. The ditch chooses a river and says, "You'll go here now," and the river laughs, then obeys. Civilization is the quiet arrogance of plumbing. At first light, you're assigned downstream of a breach. During the night, a bank sloughed the skin of a canal peeled under its own wet weight hand. Now water has opinions about where to be. A farmer stands at the edge with both hands on his head while a field he counted on drinks wrong. Flooding the barley row the way a toddler drinks from a hose. Everywhere but the mouth. He doesn't yell. He doesn't need to. The look he gives the canal is the look of someone evaluating every decision that led to this minute and deciding the entire category. Decision is a scam. The overseer barks, and suddenly the world shrinks to the span of your shoulder and a basket. Mud is a substance that holds a grudge. You slide a wicker scoop beneath it and it clings. You muscle it up and it sighs back into the hole as if gravity were a god and the god were petty. You and a dozen others move in rhythm you didn't rehearse. Scoop, lift, pass, dump, stomp, repeat. Someone braces the bank with bundles of reeds tied tight with date palm fiber. It's an architectural truth here that most problems can be temporarily convinced they are baskets. A priest appears, and the farmer straightens because your immediate supervisor is a man with a shovel. But your real boss is the god he carries in his mouth. The priest isn't a tyrant, he's an accountant with charisma. He scans the breach, murmurs to the water like it's a horse, then crouches and pinches a bit of silt between thumb and forefinger as if the texture can tell him which petition to file in heaven. He gestures. There, more. Pack the toe. It's practical instruction dressed in ritual certainty. He knows the hydraulics. He also knows people work harder when a god is watching. You want data? Here's data. Each link in this chain of labor ditch, dike, sluice gate, reservoir, levee, field furrow has a maintenance schedule. The temple keeps it on clay. Someone counts baskets by the hour and records them with marks that look like birds stepping through mist. Someone else tallies beer rations and lamp oil, and who in Ward 3 still hasn't returned the God-blessed shovel. We talk about the birth of writing like it came wrapped in poetry. It arrived inside a spreadsheet. By midday the breach behaves. The farmer's jaw unclenches. The priest says a thank you that is also a receipt. Your crew rotates to the intake where a sluice sticks. The gates would swelled in the night and the peg jammed. And what follows is the ancient Mesopotamian version of have you tried turning it off and on again, which is smack it with a mallet until the miracle of friction changes its mind. It does. The flow adjusts. A canal is a sentence. A city, a paragraph. If you don't edit constantly, it reads as disaster. You walk back through a heat that makes every surface remember the sun. The streets are narrow for a reason, shade. They are also narrow because land is a ledger entry and walls are the only insurance you own. Markets split lanes into rivers of body. Clay lamps, copper chisels, fish salted hard and strung like punctuation. Baskets, beads, perfume in conical bottles, leeks, cucumbers, onions in braids. Like rope trade is the city's other blood. Money isn't coin. It's measure. Barley is a number in a bag. Silver is for the kind of purchase where you make a promise to the future and hope it recognizes your voice later. You stop at a stall where a craftsman rubs a grey lump on his forearms and grins. Try. The thing in your hands is slippery, wrong, miraculous. Soap. Your palms squeak. Your brain does a little cartwheel because you just felt cleanliness happen in a world that usually demands bargaining. That's the thesis. Here's small hacks against entropy. Reed, mat, plow, shovel, soap, sluice, script, stacked together. They are a ladder out of animal and intercity. Back home, the courtyard poles support a canopy of woven reed that makes the sunlight softer and your family kinder. The meal is the same plot with small revision. Barley flatbread again. Lentils again. Onions always. But now there's a dish sweetened with pressed dates and a garnish of river fish jagged with salt. The smell could feed you. Someone pours beer that is less drink than paste, but keeps the desert's opinion out of your bloodstream. You eat from a common platter, because we is not an abstraction. It's a logistics model. Afternoon is for not dying. The hottest hours are truce time between sun and human. It's when you fix tools, re-rope buckets, patch sandals, teach a child to coil cord the right way. Your neighbor drifts by with a plank and a look. He's built a toy cart, 2 discs, 4 wheels, a stick for an axle, a box, a pull string. You laugh and he gets fake offended. It's for the festival, he says, but you see it. A proof of concept rolling across packed dirt. That toy will turn into a real cart. The cart will become a chariot. A rite will become a tactic. An idea will bulldoze a battlefield. In Sumer, ceremony is product R&D. You take a jar and walk toward the public well. A line coils from its lip like a human serpent. All of you arranged by the same calculus. Thirst plus capacity to wait. A teenager with a shaved crown lowers and raises the bucket as if he's been doing it since the invention of down. The jar you carry isn't yours. It's the household's. Domestic life here is communal by necessity, not ideology. The city is a network of shared obligations braided tighter than rope. A boy behind you asks where you were born. It isn't flirtation. It's metadata. In a place where clans map to craft, knowing your father is like knowing your password. You tell him Canal Crew. He nods, respectful in the way anyone is toward someone who holds the city's pulse in a shovel. He says he's studying to be a scribe. You notice his hands, clean, unscarred, calluses on the fingers that grip a stylus. You don't feel envy so much as relief that somebody wants to count the baskets while you move them. When the light softens, the city stirs. Work resumes its strenuous but survivable. You're sent to the ziggurat again, this time not for offerings, but for inventory. A storage room yawns cool like a cave. Rows of jars line shelves, grain, oil, beer. Honey each, sealed with clay, stamped by a cylinder seal that functions like a signature and a threat. Break a seal you weren't meant to, and the gods won't need to punish you. The council will. You help roll amphorae forward, chalk marks on their shoulders like freckles. A scribe reads the marks aloud, and a second scribe confirms, because accountability is redundancy, and Sumer invented both. Outside, the temple courtyard becomes theatre. A musician tunes a lyre. The sound hangs like mint on the air. Children run laps under adult unconcern because a wall and a ritual schedule are the closest things to safety you own. The high priest arrives with a procession that looks like choreography because it is humans love a predictable beat. Incense climbs from a bronze burner, fat and sweet. A smell that says we might be small, but we can make the sky notice. Why all the performance? A modern part of you wants to ask. Because performance is policy. You cannot keep a city alive with force alone. You have to keep it believing. The right tells farmers they will eat. It tells workers they will drink. It tells the gods they will be praised whether or not they earned it today. It also tells the surrounding cities Kish to the north, Uruk to the west, Lagash to the east, that this place is run by people who have their lists together. Night comes like mercy. Neighbors haul mats onto roofs. Air moves. Stories start. A man talks about a flood that reset the world. A woman counters with a hymn that's also a brewing manual. A child demands the one about the king who was 2/3 divine and found out. Immortality was bad UX. Someone tosses knucklebones, and they clatter like a tiny prophecy machine across the clay. When the gods feel far, probability is a decent understudy. Before sleep, an old teacher draws you in with a finger. Count with me. He taps the middle phalanx of your index finger. 1. He moves around your hand, phalanx by phalanx. 12. He lifts his other hand, fingers as abacus. 12 sets of 5. 60. He smiles a little. Not because we like 60, because we like fingers. This is why your minutes have 60 seconds. This is why a circle has 360 degrees. This is why time zones felt like a miracle at the top of the episode. Somewhere, a boy reciting by lamplight made a mistake, got smacked on the knuckles, and the rest of human history adopted base 60 as a courtesy to his bruises. You sleep. Finally, because the city is quiet enough to... The canal flows. The jars are sealed. The lists are balanced. The gods are fed. Nothing is guaranteed about tomorrow, but you stacked enough small victories against it that you can close your eyes without betting your life. In the morning, the gong calls a different crew. Not canals, not offerings. The Lugal rides a donkey with a bronze glitter on his chest and announces a thing cities do when irrigation. Schedules become diplomatic incidents. War, asterisk. The rumor finds you before the sun. Kish is thirsty. You feel that sentence more than you hear it, like the vibration of cartwheels over ruts long after the cart has turned a corner. Kish to the north, with its own ziggurat, its own priests who balance their own lists, its own barley fields that dream rain in Akkadian, has cut a new canal upstream. Your city has calculated the future and discovered a deficit. There are only two ways to edit a river: engineering and politics. When both fail, the Lugal puts on a helmet. He stands in the ziggurat courtyard at first light, bronze breastplate polished to a small sun, leather kilt studded, a copper axe at the hip like punctuation. He is not the N, the temple administrator who runs spreadsheets and harvest calendars. He is the big man, the ugly solution for when cooperation runs out. Behind him are the warriors' 100-ad professionals with shields, faced in leather and spear points that glint like sarcasm. Behind them is everyone else: farmers, ditchers, potters, men who are good at making and will now be asked to unmake. He doesn't give a speech so much as a weather report. Kish diverts. We starve. We march. The crowd makes that sound humans make when fear and anger mix, a kind of low electrical buzz. A priest steps up and blesses what's about to happen with words that make it sound like accounting. Pay us water. We pay you peace, default, and we collect. You're handed a spear that's taller than your sadness and a shield that looks brave and feels insufficient. Someone cinches your belt tighter, the way a mum fixes your tie on picture day. Someone else presses a small leather charm into your palm and eye painted in lapis-colored pigment. It won't stop metal. It might stop you from believing you are alone, important. The army exits the gate in a long, slow, arrhythmic animal. The professionals set the pace. The rest of you settle into it like a language you'll never fully speak. Donkeys bray under loads of ladders and bundles of red fascines, tied neat for filling trenches and soft spots. A cart rumbles a wheel, squeals a kid, runs to the roadside to watch because armies are also parades if you're 5. Outside the wall, the world opens into fields measured by canals, into rectangles of intention. A plough team pulls through a furrow, and the ox glances up as you pass like he has seen worse, and you are not interesting. By midday, you stop under a shade net rigged between 2 poles, and rationers move among you with skins of water and jars of beer. The water is a sermon. The beer is a bomb. You chew flatbread and dried fish until hope feels like it might be food. In the brief quiet, you hear the professionals talk shop. How ladders bite better if you notch the feet. How Kish's walls were patched after last flood, and there's a seam near the southwest tower where new brick meets old. How the chariot team needs a wider run, because donkeys are donkeys, and walls don't respect animals with opinions. You try not to laugh at chariot. You fail. The veteran next to you raises an eyebrow. You'll be grateful for them when they throw dust and noise at the gate and you don't have to. March again at late afternoon. The heat loosens its hands. You see Kish in the purple distance walls like a clenched jaw, the ziggurat like a tongue pressed hard to the palate of sky. Your stomach does a small, stupid flip because cities shouldn't be against cities. You know it's naive. You hope anyway. Camp is not a place so much as a pattern. Fires blink into being in a rough crescent. The professional fighters gather around a scarred man with a voice like woven leather. He draws a plan in dust. Ladders here and here. Read for scenes to fill the ditch. Shield wall push on the third gong. He assigns names to tasks and tasks to fates. The rest of you listen like students at the back of a class, nodding hard and understanding half. Somebody starts a low song that is less art than anesthesia. You sleep in pieces. The ground is a meticulous historian and records your bones one ache at a time. Dawn is red on the edge. You line up because that's what bodies do before they learn if they'll still be bodies by lunch. The pros go first because that's the job. You follow because there isn't an opposite choice that keeps your family fed. The chariot 2 wheels, 2 men. 1 donkey with ribbons he did not ask. 4 rattles forward and your laugh from yesterday feels obscene now. It draws a wash of attention, dust, and stones away from the ladder crew. And you learn the difference between a tactic and a joke. Arrows rise from Kish's wall like punctuation marks thrown by a bad teacher. Early archery isn't precise, and it doesn't matter when you're the paragraph. One finds a man next to you in the meat above his clavicle. The sound he makes is honest. 4 hands pull him back, and you see a boy in the crenel gap above who doesn't look like a soldier so much as a son. Everything here is someone's kid. You tuck that truth somewhere and hope it doesn't get in the way when you need to be a different kind of person. Ladders thump against brick. A defender shoves one away and 3 men fall in a tangle of limbs and wood and timing. You help lever it back with the top edge hooked just enough that it bites. Your hands know how to lift baskets. They recognize the physics immediately. Up you go because someone behind you is already on the rungs. And there isn't a world where you climb down now. The top of a wall is a terrible place to think. The stones are uneven. The air is knives. A man with a spear appears in front of you, and both of you do the math. And then you are 2 equations trying to cancel the other. He thrusts. You deflect with your shield, and your wrist explodes with pain but holds. You thrust back, and your point doesn't find his ribs. It finds the meat just under them where breathing lives. He folds like a map. The world tunnels. You breathe because he can't. You have time to decide if that makes you a villain or a father or a statistic. Someone ramps you from the side and your brain chooses alive and shelves the question. When the gate opens, it's because someone inside broke a thing that wanted not to break. The flood that follows is men, and you are either under it or in it or both. Streets inside, the walls funnel and multiply attackers. Defenders throw baked clay roof tiles and pots of hot water because when siege tech is baby-sized, you weaponize housework. You duck a jar that detonates at your hip. Heat licks your calf. Your hair smells like caution. The fight ends the way these fights end. Not with righteous trumpet blast victory, but with attention spans running out. Defenders tire. Attackers wedge. A piece of wall matters and then doesn't. Somewhere the Lugal raises his axe, and someone on the other side decides they like their children more than their principles. A horn moans. Surrender is a flavor you can taste from the middle of a street. After is the hard part to talk about on channels that want heroes and villains as if people come in to SKR. There is looting. The promise of what we take feeds our children is a civic anesthetic with centuries of clinical trials. Some do it with shouting. Some do it quiet, like inventory. You step backward from a storehouse where men stack sacks of barley into a pyramid of compromise, and your stomach climbs into your throat because you can see your own city from the wrong angle now. Prisoners gather in a square with eyes like dried riverbeds. The Lugal speaks formal words that sound like a treaty until you remember the population is a resource like grain. A scribe presses them into a tablet that will outlive everyone here. It says who owes what to whom. It says, in a series of neat wedges, that survival can be measured and therefore build. On the march home, the sky is enormous again, and the land once more looks like a story about human intention. Your spear is lighter without the day inside it. A man with a bandage where his shoulder used to be sings a joke that makes the worst kind of sense. The donkey cart squeals. The professionals walk the way people walk who slept 3 inches from death and decided its snow-red dot back through the gate shore. Gate the city enlarges around you like a lung. People line streets with that mixed expression civic leaders aspire to. Relief with gratitude sprinkles. Your mother cries like water finds low places. Your father grips your forearm and shakes once like a man closing a deal. Your little brother eyes your sandals with an optimism you have missed terribly. You sit. They place bread in your hand. You chew. It tastes like barley and a decision you will consider later, when nobody is telling a story crowded with gods about what just happened that night. You lie on the roof under a sky so crowded with stars it looks like a spilled library. Somewhere far north, a mountain people you haven't met yet are staring at their own sky. Somewhere far west, a town you've never heard of is telling a story about their god and the river and a promise. You don't know the names, yet Gutians, Amorites, Akkadians, but they are coming, as sure as silt dot. And tomorrow the gong will call you back to the ditch, because war is a crisis. Irrigation is a job. Cities are kept not by victories but by maintenance, and maintenance is love dressed as labor. Next inside. The scribal school where the first accountants accidentally invent literature, and why a teenager's sore knuckles still run your calendar. Also, the wheel's boring origin story, spoiler, not war, not speed parade, asterisk. You arrive at the scribal quarter before the heat has chosen its victims. The building looks unremarkable from the lane mud brick, timber lintel doorway, shaded by a woven mat, but step inside and time changes shape. The air is cooler, the light higher, and you can hear the soft percussion of civilization being made. Press, lift, smooth. Press, lift, smooth. 30 boys, 2 lucky girls sit cross-legged around low tables, each with a palm-sized tablet of slick clay and a reed stylus cut at an angle that would impress a barber. A teacher moves among them, hands clasped behind his back, gaze like a plumb line. This is not a library. It's a factory that makes memory. Hold the stylus like this, he says, shaping a wrist the way a potter shapes a lip. Not like a spear. You are not killing the tablet. You are convincing it. He taps a shoulder when a wedge runs too deep. He taps harder when a wedge slants like a drunk. Everyone knows he can tap hard enough to bruise. Nobody complains. Here, pain is a pedagogy, and respect is the interest. You pay on the loan of knowledge. The tablet in your lap is a puddle wearing a disguise. The teacher dictates, and your hand obeys. A column of numerals. A list of barley rations owed by Ward 7 for work on the East Levee. The marks aren't pictures anymore. They're ideas that learned to put on uniforms. One wedge stacked next to another becomes 10. Turn the same wedge 90 degrees, and the number turns into a word: bread, sheep, jar, loan. The first time you watch a sign mean to different things based only on context. You feel the world get taller. A boy to your right wipes his tablet with a damp rag and starts again. His hands shake. He's already earned 2 taps for messy signs today, and the third tap will be a smack. You remember a different classroom in your own life, whiteboard squeak, and the smell of dry error solvent, fluorescent light that made your skin feel like paper, and you realize brutality wears fashion. The stakes here are clearer: learn or dig. Learn well, and you'll count instead of being counted. Break. The teacher nods once, and the room exhales. Kids flex cramped fingers. Someone passes a bowl of dates. You chew and watch a scribe set wet tablets in a rack by the door where air moves best. Some tablets will be dried in the shade and shelved for years. Some contracts, legal judgments, hymns. Stories will be baked hard in a kiln until they could survive a fire, a flood, a city's death. It's an odd feeling to recognize objects in the making that will outlive their makers by 3 millennia. Then sit under glass while a woman in a cardigan whispers to a child, "See, sweetie." These marks mean goat. You return for afternoon session and learn what the classroom was built to hide. Writing is math dressed in syllables. The teacher scratches a problem into clay with a borrowed stylus point. We have a field measured so, 30 by 40 cubits. The canal feeds it with a gate that yields 9 jars per hour. How long to irrigate to a depth of 1 finger? A murmur, hands move. Numbers in base 60 shuffle into position like soldiers taking posts. This place didn't choose 60 because it's mystical. It chose 60 because you can divide it by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30. Fractions sit happier on a denominator that says yes more often. You measure your own fingers without meaning to. 12 segments per hand. 5 fingers on the other hand to count sets of 12. You could build a clock with the parts you're born wearing. The boy beside you whispers the trick for the hour-to-jar conversion, and you share your trick for square area in cubits, and you both grin. Conspirators in the oldest racket. Friendship a shared hack. The teacher pretends he doesn't see it. He does. Communities that last don't police cooperation. They require it near sunset. The head scribe arrives with a tablet so large it needs 2 hands and a bad back. He holds it like an altar plate. The room straightens. "From the office of the N," he says, and you can feel the whole building take the shape of an ear. It's an audit. Wheat from Ward 2, listed short 3 jars. A loan to a brewer who forgot to pay his interest. A set of oxen gone missing the week a cousin of a guard bought a new house. Nobody says corruption aloud. Everyone knows corruption's address. He hands the tablet to a promising boy with scars on the knuckles of his left hand, the ones that hold the tablet flat while the right hand writes. "Copy this." 2 copies. Deliver 1 to the temple store and 1 to the guard captain. If the copies do not match the original, I will know. It's bureaucracy, yes. It's also a gym for the muscle civilization needs most. Accountability. Watching the kid steady his breath before the first wedge, you realize you're seeing a miracle we rarely celebrate. The invention of guilt. Not the religious kind, though there's that too, but the professional shame of being the person whose column doesn't add. The day ends with a story. Because teachers are mammals and mammals narrate. The head scribe leans against a pillar and tells the legend of the king of Uru, the one with 2/3 divinity and 1/3 regret, who watched his best friend die and tried to outrun the truth that waits for everyone. You watch kids lean forward, mouths open. The wedges taught their hands to turn lists into laws. Stories teach their hearts to turn laws into choices. On your way out, you pass a tablet left to dry on a windowsill. It's a school exercise. The same sign pressed 20 times, each a little truer than the last. In the margin, the teacher has added a note. Sloppy. Do better. It reads harsh until you remember every bridge, plane, and pacemaker you've trusted was built by people who had a sloppy, do-better year. The city survives because someone once felt small and chose improvement over defense. The lane outside smells of oil and fry, onions and yeast, hot clay and cooler air. The ziggurat steps catch late light and throw it back as if refusing to let the day end yet. You think about your own life, the apps, the pings, the thumbs scroll and you see it suddenly. The same bargain written in a different font. Trade attention for meaning. Trade labor for time. Trade ignorance for the pain of knowing. You tuck a mental tablet into your own chest. On it, a single wedge, gratitude. Then another beneath it, responsibility. Civilization is a ledger that balances only if enough people write those signs every day. Tomorrow medicine, and magic in the time before germs. Why the healer chants while setting your bone, and the moment when a surgeon's fee becomes law that recognizes risk and error and punishment. Asterisk, the injury announces itself with a snap you feel in your teeth. A man on the canal crew missteps on a muddy shelf. His leg folds wrong. He howls. No sirens. No MRI. Just a circle of bodies. Some curious, some competent. And one person already sprinting for the temple because the temple keeps healers the way granaries keep grain. You pray not to need them, and you will. The healer arrives fast enough to impress a stopwatch and wears 2 identities like a double-sided seal, physician and priest. Around his neck hangs a pouch of herbs. In his hand is a small wooden case that holds bone splints, a bronze knife that has kissed fire more than once, strips of clean linen, and wrapped like contraband, a tablet with a checklist of chants. He doesn't waste breath on bedside pep talks. There's a fracture to set, an infection to outrun. Hold him, he says, and for neighbors become restraints without debate. He palpates the calf with thumbs that know the difference between muscle spasm and misalignment. He listens with his fingers. He closes his eyes, not in mystic trance, but in a focus so pure the city evaporates. Then he speaks not to the man, but to the unseen. Namtar, demon of fate, depart. Utu, lord of justice, look with light on this limb. He looks up, locks eyes with the patient, and says the most human thing in any language. Breathe. He pulls. The bones argue. He negotiates. The leg yields by a millimeter, then a centimeter. Then the angle looks like a promise instead of a sentence. The man thrashes. The healer's chant tightens. The neighbors hold a little harder. You feel your own breath stagger in sympathy. When the ends kiss, the healer nods once like a craftsman satisfied with a joint. Splints go on 2, then a third. Linen wraps in a spiral that looks like a rule. A paste of crushed willow and oil thick as grief is smeared to cool the swelling. Willow, you've eaten aspirin hung over and think of the tree's gift as a pill. Here it's a bark scraped with a stone and the shared memory that it helps. You ask careful, respectful why the chant. The healer doesn't take offense. He's heard the question in 100 voices since his apprenticeship. Because words matter, he says. Because fear listens to rhythm. Because pain is a god that yields to music sometimes. Because everything we do is a bet against the dark. Why would we not stack our bets? He grins. Also, it calms the family so they stop shouting at me while I work. Asterisk, he prescribes rest. A diet heavier in fish and dates, if the family can manage it. And an offering at the next right beer, and a small cake to thank the gods for not being worse. He also leaves a bitter brew for fever, and makes the patient's wife swear she boil water before washing the wound. Not because he knows microbes, but because the water looks dirty and the man before him died, when they didn't. Sumerian medicine advances by funeral. Asterisk. At the temple complex, there's a chamber that smells like a decision. Crushed herbs rubbed into a mortar. Resin smoke, burned wool, old blood. Shelves hold jars labeled by signs. Antiseptic isn't a word yet, but honey for wound. Copper salts for rot. Beer wash when water is suspect exist as working hypotheses carved in clay. On a low table lies a bronze set any trauma surgeon would recognize across a gulf of years' knives, hooks, probes, forceps. Bronze doesn't cut like steel, but it cuts. Fire licks the blades. Oil cools them after. Sterility isn't a doctrine. It's a superstition with good optics. Enough tools are heated enough times that statistics, slowly, tilt toward survival behind a screen. A woman tries to breathe a baby into the world while two midwives orchestrate the miracle as if it were choreography. One rubs the small of the laboring back in circles you could draw from memory. The other catches rhythm. They murmur to the goddess who cares about wombs and war and everything sticky in between. They tie a cord with a practiced flick and cut with a blade that has seen too many beginnings to bear witness anymore. The room hemorrhages relief. In ancient Sumer, this is victory more impressive than any siege. You pass a shelf of tablet-scase notes long before anyone called them that. Some are triumphs. Some are autopsies written by men who learned from their mistakes before it was a professional norm. One tablet details a tumor like a gourd removed with cuts that followed the moon's favor. Another admits failure with a humility that makes you ache. We applied the poultice of fig and wine. Fever did not abate. The patient was taken by the hand of the god. A third is practical to the point of poetry. If pus runs like thin beer, cleanse daily and bind. If pus runs like curds, call the family. You ask about fees. The healer grimaces without apology. There are rules, he says, else people kill us when they don't like the endings. He means law. Somewhere in a temple chest sits a slate of codes that spell out what a physician earns when he succeeds, and what he pays when he fails. If a surgeon operates with a bronze knife on a free man and the man dies, he loses his hand. If he operates on a slave and the slave dies, he pays the owner compensation. The law doesn't understand microbes or probability. It understands deterrence. It also grants, in a backhand way, that surgery is a specialty at risk, taken and paid for. Modern malpractice lawyers would recognize the shape of the conversation, if not the price list. You step back into the evening with the smell of smoke in your hair and the taste of willow on your tongue. You think about the way your own doctor's office smells cleaning agents, printer toner, hand sanitizer with an upbeat label you pretend not to read, and the gap between then and now collapses. The job is the same. face the fact of bodies and time's appetite and do something stubborn anyway. On the way home, you pass a woman with a bowl of blue pigment, crushing it with fierce, impatient love. For eyes, she says, tapping the corner of her own, the coal not just decoration but defense flies, glare, sun. Beauty here isn't indulgence. It's technology with good PR. At the corner shrine, you find the fractured man's wife placing a cup of beer on the little ledge. She glances at you, half shy, half bold. For the god, she says, and for luck. You nod. You don't tell her luck is an emergent property of 10,000 small, smart habits. You don't tell her beer is safer than water, that willow holds the whisper of aspirin, that linen strips washed in boiled water are the difference between a scar and a grave. You just say the most honest thing you can. May he heal. Later, under a roof sky that leaks cool onto your face, you inventory what the day taught. Medicine is courage, wearing a smock. Even now, with your sterile rooms and your mapped genome, and your pills clocked to the enzyme. The ritual is the same. A person stands between a body and what intends it harm and says no. Sometimes the no is loud. Sometimes it's a hummed chant in the exact rhythm the patient knows how to breathe to. Courts tomorrow, a theft, a verdict, and the moment written law stands up to mood. Also, why cutting off a hand makes a crude kind of sense until you watch a council choose mercy that still hurts. Asterisk, the announcement runs through the lanes like a wire. Trial in the ziggurat courtyard at midday. People drift toward the temple as if the gong installed magnets in their ribs. Public justice is part entertainment, part instruction, part threat, part hope. You go to, because cities teach by spectacle. If the law is stone on a wall, it's for gods. If it's stone in a square, it's for us. The accused is a young man with dust in his hair, and a face that can't decide which way to break. He's bound at the wrists, rope rough enough to leave a mark he'll carry for days after the knot is cut. The charge is theft. 3 sacks of barley from temple store. It's theft of calories, of rations, of months of human life measured in porridge and flatbread and beer. It's also a different sentence. My children were hungry. His mother stands near the back of the crowd with a hand to her mouth and a posture that screams, please. The end-priest administrator sits on a chair high enough to make the architecture complicit in authority. Beside him, elders, men whose hair and minds have gone white without leaving. A scribe kneels, stylus poised over fresh clay, ready to solder the moment into a future he'll never see. A guard captain stands at a slant, bored in the way men get when they pretend to understand everything that could happen next. Witnesses speak. One saw the accused near the granary after moonrise. Another saw him staggering under weight that looked like barley, not water. A third swears he warned the boy weeks ago to keep his hands clean. The accused doesn't deny. He tells a story you can recite for him. Ration short, second child sick, wife desperate, prayer unanswered by jars. He ends with a plea that could be law if the city wanted it. Take me, not my hands. The law is written, literally. A tablet in a chest says what happens when barley changes ownership without permission, fines, lashes, maiming, slavery, sometimes death if the amount is high and the season is tight. The code isn't humanist. It's actuarial. It asks, what penalty discourages the math that says steal and survive for enough people that the granary doesn't go empty? A city is a loaf divided fairly enough that people accept unequal slices without burning the bakery. The elders whisper. The end frowns in a way that suggests an internal argument. He looks at the mother. He looks at the scribe. He looks at the sky as if the god of storms might annotate the moment with thunder. Then he speaks. The law says one thing. The drought says another. The council says a third. He pauses until the crowd leans forward as if curiosity could physically tip the scale. The thief will not lose his hand. A rippling exhale, he will lose 10 years. A groan, temple service. His household will receive rations at half measure. After his service, he returns free. If he runs, his hand answers the law, its mercy with teeth. The crowd murmurs a calculus of approval and disappointment. Some wanted blood because blood is satisfying and shallow. Some wanted the granary safe more than they wanted the boy punished. Some wanted a parable to tell their children tonight. Do not steal. The temple is not full. You will regret. Everyone got a version of what they wanted. Nobody got all of it. That's how you can tell the decision wasn't theater. The scribe's stylus kisses clay. The verdict becomes a text that is more than memory, less than truth. The official story. A guard leads the boy away. He walks like someone trying to memorize what freedom felt like half an hour ago. His mother does a sound mothers make in every era when a son is taken by a system that might be right. You don't translate it. You carry it home like contraband and find it later under your ribs. Why not cut the hand? The N isn't naive. A hand cut today may satisfy the crowd and sharpen deterrence for a week, a month, a year. It also removes a worker from a workforce that keeps dikes high and canals clean. A city is only as safe as its ditch. 10 years of temple service reassigns guilt into labor. It is punishment that feeds the same machine theft tried to starve. Also, without putting too fine a point on it, gods prefer hands to cut bread and pour beer. You wander the market after judgment and see how law touches everything you buy. Weights and measures aren't suggestions. The balanced scale sits on every stall like a deity with too much eye contact. A potter's standard jar equals a standard measure. If it doesn't, he risks a fine and a reputation's slow burn. A coppersmith stamps a mark into the blade of a chisel, a promise that it won't shear under work. Contracts marriage, loan, apprenticeship have forms so specific you suspect the temple sells templates. They might law. Here is you, ex-tested on thousands of lives, refined until most people can use it without asking a priest for tech support. You turn down a side lane and find a pair of men arguing with the dizziness of people who haven't learned to disagree without performing it. The problem is boundary stones. In a country where fields are geometry and water is arithmetic, boundary stones are punctuation you don't move without permission. One man swears, the other nudged a stone by a hand's bread small to an eye, massive to a harvest. An elder happens by and adjudicates like a pop-up court. He measures by stride and memory, checks the silt drift against the stone's weathering, and delivers a verdict that satisfies nobody and prevents blood. Law isn't just tablets. It's elders who learned fairness in the meat grinder of seasons. At evening rite, the high priest offers a lamb and a prayer for justice, and you watch the crowd watch him. Some see divine will silhouetted in oil smoke. Some see a man whose family eats better than most. Some don't care why the gods are thanked as long as the water flows. A city is a coalition of motives. Law holds them together long enough that children learn to be adults inside it. And yet, there's a sour note even the incense can't smother. Justice here bends toward stability more often than grace. If you're rich, your fine is a fee. If you're poor, your fee is a life. The counseling phrase "the system works" needs the addendum "for whom." You know that truth like you know your street in the dark, by muscle memory. But here's the counterweight. Written law is a mirror the city can hold up to itself. Mirrors don't fix faces. They show what needs fixing. You climb to the roof with a bowl of lentils and watch torches scribble their own language on the lanes below. In the distance, beyond fields that change color with the hour, you can make out another city's low glow. Their laws are similar, their punishments a little different. Their gods a lot louder, their scribes equally certain their way is the way. Each city-state is a proposition. This is how we arrange humans against disaster. Each will be proven wrong eventually, and right enough for now, before sleep. You imagine a law code centuries from here that will be copied so. Often its phrases will become shortcuts in arguments, and your high school textbook will show a photo of it and call it Hammurabi. It will formalize the instincts you watched. Today's specific penalties, public posting, an attempt to weigh intent and outcome with something heavier than mood. It won't be fair. It will be fairer than knives. Progress never arrives as a revolution, so much as a ledger with neater columns. Tomorrow we rest not from labor, but in it, music that makes heat tolerable, games with crooked dice, and why the goddess of beer was also a systems engineer. Then tech, stack, plow, wheel. Soap how tiny tools change empires. Asterisk the worst heat peels off the day. The way a potter peels a vessel from the wheel. Careful. Inevitable. A little squeak of relief at the end. Shadows lengthen. Lanes learn softness. And the city makes a decision older than irrigation. Night we will be human on purpose in the square. A musician lifts a lyre that looks like a question mark and answers it with sound. You can name instruments after shapes all you want. Harp, flute, drum, but what they really are is negotiations with physics. Contracts with air you renew by breath. He plucks a fourth, then a fifth. Lets the interval hover long enough that your shoulders unclench without asking permission, and then slides into a melody the children know by foot before they know it by name. A woman in a blue shawl taps a framed drum with a palm that has swaddled babies and kneaded dough and buried 3 winters' worth of grief. The rhythm she chooses is a road the rest of you can walk without tripping. In a corner of the square, 2 boys slap knucklebones onto a scratched board. Sheep-ankled dice clattering like little arguments with chance. They gamble in barley and bravado. The bones are crooked, imperfect in the same way people are. The game works because everyone agrees to be fooled together. You make a lap of the market before the last stalls shutter. The oil fryer is still singing while he pulls curled strips of fish from shimmering pans and dusts, them with salt that traveled by boat and bargain. The potter turns a jar in late light, listening for a clean wrinkly telling truth about its density. The coppersmith holds up a chisel to the sky's edge and squints with the seriousness of a priest. All of it is art, all of it is utility, all of it is survival, dressed pretty so you remember to want tomorrow. Someone brings a jar with a reed for a mouth and the right to call itself beer. You've heard the Sumerians invented beer tossed around like trivia. It isn't trivia here. It's supply chain. Grain becomes mash, becomes wort, becomes ferment, becomes ration, becomes reason. The city doesn't die of its own water. You drink through a straw, not affectation, but technologies so chaff and yeast sediment. Don't argue with your tongue. It's sweet, thick, floral with date, and the alcohol hum is less party than pillow for nerves. A brewer stands near the jar like a captain next to her ship. It's a hymn, she tells you, and recites lines you recognize from fragments carved into tablets. An ode to the goddess of beer that is also a recipe with better steep the malt in a sleepy bath. She intones, eyebrows lifted with professional pride. You want to applaud the sheer audacity of writing instructions as religion. You do applaud, because the beer tastes like reprieve. A storyteller takes a place on a low wall, posture practiced a back that knows how to be a stage. He announces nothing. The crowd edits itself tighter by instinct. That's the thing about cities. Strangers choreograph together without meeting. He begins with a hook older than grief. You wake in a reed house. The river has climbed the stairs. Everyone goes still, as if silence were a ritual that feeds gods you actually like. He tells a flood you've heard it, but tonight it lands different. The hero is less chosen and more stubborn. The gods are less petty and more weather. The moral isn't obedience. It's preparedness. You thought you were tired of the story until you remember that stories aren't repeated for trivia. They're repeated for calibration. A young scribe edges closer to a singer with a double flute and asks if she can copy the melody onto clay. The singer laughs, not unkindly. You can draw the words, she says, but the breath won't sit for a portrait. You will one day invent notation dots and stems in a grid that turns air into ink, but not yet. For now, music is a software you run by ear, updated with every rehearsal, forked across families, patched by memory against the bugs of time. A dancer steps into the circle wearing shells at her ankles. The sound is rain you can wear. She isn't performing so much as demonstrating that locomotion can confess. Hips tell one truth. Shoulders tell another. Hands gossip about balance. She is not priestess. She is not prostitute. She is a person in a body turning gravity into mathematics you can't solve but can count. The children copy her. The elders wince in a language called back. Near the shrine, a group plays the royal game, the racing board, with rosettes for safe landings and squares where probability goes to sulk. Pieces hop according to knucklebone laws you learned on a roof. A man who insists he is not superstitious mutters to his pieces as if they were negotiable. When he wins, he will call it skill. When he loses, he will call it bones. This is human. It is why casinos will always have carpet at the edge of a lane. Two lovers touch foreheads and try to invent a privacy the city refuses to sell. They are awkward, tender, present, doomed to parenthood, doomed to heartbreak, doomed to each other for longer than a song. You look away and back and away again, because to be a neighbor is to oscillate between witness and courtesy. A healer hums to himself while rewrapping a bandage. The tune is a prayer he won't admit is for him. A potter and a brickmaker argue about whose craft holds up more of the city. The potter's jars protect grain from rats. The brickmaker's bricks make jars necessary. They settle it by drinking until the verbs soften and everything is true enough. A girl haggles for a cone of perfume shaped like a pyramid, scented with resin and citrus rind, meant to melt on her head over the hour like a slow crown. She will wear it to a festival when the ziggurat bleeds lamps into a black sky and the priests pretend they don't notice. Teenagers inventing flirting near holy things. The temple choir lines up on the second terrace. Voices in layers like brick. They sing a call to the planet Godstar points that are also personalities you can bribe. You've read about Sumerian astronomy as if it were a list of firsts. Hearing it is better. They chant the calendar into your bones, months that follow the moon, but get corrected by the necessity of wheat. They sing the week into your week. 7 breaths you will exhale for the rest of your life without remembering why it's 7. Asterisk night deepens. Stars show you geometry. The Milky Way is a road no one owns with a traffic pattern that makes poets credible. The wind does its soft broom routine across rooftops. Somewhere, a donkey decides to have an opinion about the moon. Someone on a far roof laughs in the exact rhythm your sister used to laugh, which makes you understand that lineage is not blood. It's noise. You walk home slow, tasting salt on your upper lip, clay in the back of your throat, dates on your gums, the faint metallic autograph of the reed straw. The lane outside your door holds cool like a secret. Inside, your people are making beds in a choreography more intimate than prayer. This is the point of music, you think. Not escape, not ecstasy endurance. That doesn't feel like punishment. Asterisk, asterisk. You lie down and the mat remembers you. The city hums through walls like a cat purring in the next room. Before sleep lands, you roll onto an elbow and speak to the future you carry around like contraband. If we ever forget this, you whisper. If we ever forget that Singanshare is the only way through a desert disguised as history, remind us. You close your eyes. Somewhere in the square, last chords ring like coins in a bowl and then fold into the night. Tomorrow will require ditches again. Tonight was how you earned the will to dig them. Tools next the plow. The wheel, the soap bar that made cleanliness a verb. The cylinder seal that made signatures portable. And why the first wheeled vehicles probably weren't for war, but for showing off God's asterisk. The miracle people point to is the ziggurat. The miracles that did the work are in your hand. Start with a stick. Sharpened, it becomes a digging spear that turns hardpan into a grudging yes. 2 sticks with a crossbar. Ho, the syllable half the planet still pronounces daily. Hitch wood to muscle, and you get the tool that freed bodies from 1 billion squats the yard. The simple plow. Not the iron-beaked monster that flips a furrow like a rude page, but a wooden tooth that scratches lines obedient to oxen. Watch it bite the field. Watch soil invert into promise. You can feel the city exhale. 1 person becomes 10. 10 become a class of people who don't have to farm at all because the field is now complicit in your labor. You run a palm along the plow beam and feel oil rubbed in by generations of hands that understood maintenance as religion. The harness is braided from date fiber and patience. The blade is wood, charred and hardened fire, making oak remember it wanted to be useful. The farmer guiding the rig is half choreographer, half whisperer. He hums to the ox like a parent, clicks his tongue, taps the beam, and the animal accepts a geometry that becomes bread. Then the wheel-less thunderclap, more parade float. People imagine the first wheel squealed into existence on a battlefield with a cheer. It probably rolled onto a festival ground with a hymn. 4 planks cross-binned into a circle, a wooden axle greased with fat. A cart to carry a god statue so the city could see itself believing. Someone watched that procession and thought, quietly, treacherously, what if jars? Next market day, 2 men rolled a cart stacked with amphorae past a line of donkeys and didn't carry the weight in their spines. They sold faster and more, and the rest is an arms race with gravity. You squat next to a cartwright shaping an axle with a bronze adze. He measures by eye and habit. Too tight and the friction becomes a tantrum. Too loose and the cart promises one direction and delivers another. He slots the axle through a box chassis reinforced with clever joinery and wedges. He slides a wheel on with a sound that scratches your brain. Push, he says, and the cart moves with the stubborn joy of a thing that knows it just hacked nature. Later, soldiers will strap shields to these and call them chariots. For now, they are logistics in a world where distance was the enemy. Soap is a grey loaf pretending not to be holy. Your neighbor, the experimenter, has calibrated his recipe with the seriousness of a man who lost a friend to a fever and refused to learn nothing. Animal fat melted, skimmed, clarified. Ash from burned desert shrubs, sifted fine enough to be vanity. Water measured by hand until it feels like a ratio. Heat low, stir slow, the mix becoming something that lifts dirt the way kindness lifts shame. He cuts bars while still warm, and then waits days, weeks until they cure into usefulness. He sells out before noon. Cleanliness is a status symbol until you realize it also keeps children. Then it's infrastructure. Seals, those tiny masterpieces rolled in clay. Like signatures that learned to dress up, turn commerce into trust, and trust into speed. You watch a merchant unstopper a jar by cracking the clay and rolling out a little scene. 2 lions, a tree, a god, his own name compressed into a design that says mine without needing a witness. Contracts are faster when identity fits in the palm. You want to put a modern corporate logo next to it and say, oh, we didn't invent anything, we just iterated. In a workshop near the gate, a smith pours melted copper into a bivalve mold sanded smooth by obsession. The pour is a bright ribbon that makes your eyebrows lean back. The mold shivers. The smith cracks it open like a spell and reveals a blade that is not yet a blade, flashing to file. Edge to grind, temper to coax. You understand why people worshipped fire. It converts stubborn into obedient and then asks to be fed. Nearby, a weaver sets up a loom that turns string into surface. Warp, weft, the cross, and under. The rhythm a hand can tattoo into your future. She works wool and flax, spins lines so even you'd think a machine did it. She dyes with madder and indigo, with onion skin and crushed insect, with iron and vinegar and trilandera, more precise than a textbook. A wealthy woman runs fingers over a finished bolt and feels status. A child runs under it and feels shade. Utility is democracy's first cousin when a city is kind. When it isn't, fabric becomes politics you can wear. A potter kicks a wheel and the disc spins into a daymaker. He centers clay the way a mind centers itself on a breath. He pulls a cylinder, flares a rim, presses a thumb trail that will tell an archaeologist his mood 14 lifetimes from now. Kill heat hardens pots into possibility, storage, cooking, light. He paints a simple motifa, net of lines, because he likes the way it looks, and because patterns catch memory and hold it still long enough to teach a hand. The kill coughs smoke. He listens like a hunter. A pot will ping when it's cooling, if it's true. He waits for music. It comes. The tech stack is small things stacked. A mat woven of reeds keeps a child off damp earth, and therefore off a fever that would have named itself permanent. A ladder leaned against a wall makes height a tool instead of a dare. A bucket with a reinforced lip means a woman's wrists get to be 50 instead of 40. A lamp's wick, engineered from the heart of a plant, spills enough light that a boy can keep practicing wedges after sunset. Nothing here is spectacular singly. Together, they turn a place from camp into city. You visit a yard where sledges lie like punctuation marks. Men slide blocks on greased planks with a chorus of grunts. Wheels don't win every argument. Sometimes sledges are better because friction is a negotiation and sand has opinions. The foreman demonstrates a roller technique: lay logs, skid the block, leapfrog the rear log to the front, like a magician showing you the trick and daring you to still applaud. You do. Movement is the beating heart of a city. Any hack that makes it cheaper is promoted to culture. An old man shows you a clay pipe meant to carry water through a wall without eroding the wall. It's a sleeve, wedged and mortared. He slides it into place with a sigh like a prayer and pats it twice as if it were an animal that needed reassurance. He is not engineer. He is the person who refused to let a leak ruin all the other good ideas. That's the job description for most of the heroes you'll never know. A mother pulls a comb through a child's hair with the gentleness of someone who knows exactly how hard life can already be. The comb is bone, carved smooth, teeth fine enough to pick out the sand that loves scalps. She oiled the comb with sesame, perfumed with herbs. Hygiene here is practical and performance and love letter. I want you to be seen at the end of the alley. A cylinder seal carver squints at a bit of stone under a lens of water until you swear he's trying to shame the pebble into revealing its best self. He cuts a lion with 3 curls in its mane and a god with a hat that means sky. He drills a hole 4-chord. He inks and rolls the design on damp clay with a flourish that says, "This is identity that can be copied without being stolen." He hands the seal to a boy becoming a man. The boy turns it in his palm and feels what you felt the first time a key fob chirped a car alive. The technology is smaller. The sensation is the same at night. You list the day's miracles: blade, beam, bucket, bar, barrel, braid. You think about your own world's miracles, disguised as apps and patches and updates. You wonder if the difference between then and now is just speed and insulation. How fast we expect the world to nod yes. How little we feel the cost of a no. You fall asleep, trying to decide whether progress is a big staircase or a pile of pebbles. You dream of both. Tomorrow we go wide boats to Dilmun, donkeys to the Zagros, caravan bells and storm omens, cylinder seals as passports, and the long risk calculus that turns strangers into partners. Suma's trade web, asterisk at first light. The river is a black ribbon singed with mist, and boats crouch at the bank like beetles with errands. Trade is the city's second bloodstream, and you can trace it by wake and wheel rut, by tally mark and rumour. Today you follow both. Downriver, men load jars into a long, low craft stitched from planks and sealed with bitumen that smells like the ancient earth decided to remember you. The cargo hums like a recipe: oil, beer, dates, honey, cloth, copper tools, wrapped in straw. A small chest of cylinder seals for merchants who need a name they can roll. To sailors argue about wind with the intimacy of a married pair. It will turn, one says, because the morning does what mornings do. The other grunts and coils a rope. He loves facts more than pattern. They will both be right eventually. Asterisk. The boatman shows you a list scratched into clay and already drying on the Decca manifest. A promise, a prayer to the god of delivery. South, he says. Dilmun. His mouth shapes the word with a little reverence, a little greed. An island down the gulf where shells were more blue than the sky. A place that sometimes feels mythical when the wind is wrong, and a workday when the wind behaves. You step back as the crew pulls the vessel into the current. A priest on the bank mutters a benediction that is also a weather report. Kids wave. A woman ties a knot in a cord and tucks it into her belt, and you realize it's a charm. A knot she tees out when the boat comes home so the wish can unspool too. You watch until the wake stops, pretending to be a line. The boat becomes story, then dot, then nothing. Trade begins with faith. On the North Road, a caravan steps out like a sentence that knows where it's going. Donkeys with panniers, bells tied just loose enough to tell the driver if somebody decides to improvise. Wool, finished, cloth, oil, barley for feed. A few luxury jars sealed like secret's perfume, resin, a lapis bead or two hoarded for the perfect trade. The lead merchant wears a cloak stitched with patches that are not decoration. They are a map of places he's survived. On his belt hangs a seal carved with a scene of two men shaking hands under a star. It isn't an ideal, it's a warranty. The world will try to turn every contract into weather. This says, we will act as if promises hold. You walk with them past fields that learn gold, into scrub that refuses to be named, toward a pass where the land pinches travelers and bandits closer than either wants. The guards' thin men with eyes like knives walk a weighted rhythm that says they've done this longer than you have been alive. They joke in the spaces between tree and tree. The merchant keeps a ledger in his head and a tablet in his pack, because memory is a liar in market towns. He knows exactly what a good donkey can carry, and exactly how much outrage a customs officer can fake, and exactly when to mark a loss as education at noon. The caravan stops at a way station where a woman with arms like beams ladles stew from a pot that's probably older than your civic prayers. She takes pay in barley and gossip, and prefers gossip. It informs the next price. Road ahead is muddy, someone says. Mud means time, someone answers. Time is cost, someone else concludes. Prices adjust like birds adjusting formation. They leave a little more than they should, because next month the stew will need to be there again. At a low ridge, the caravan splits. One leg heads toward the mountains, the Zagros, where stone is cheap and wood is a rumor, where copper waits in veins like stubborn treasure, where tribes trade wool and goats and news. The other leg aims east for a city you haven't met yet, with a river you can't pronounce right the first time, where people call their land Meluha and wear carnelian like a promise, where seals bear animals you've never seen and script that looks like a festival of flags. You've seen a Meluhan in the market once taller than average, hair oiled and perfumed, eyes that took inventory of you like you were a stall. He bought sesame, sold beads, asked 3 too many questions about canal gates. Spies and merchants share a curriculum. Back in the river quarter, a cargo of timber arrives from far places where trees still throw shade like scandal. The logs look like an apology the forest sent after a bad argument. Sumer has no wood to spare. The river valley burned its trees for brick and bread and heat a long time ago. Timber is a luxury and a necessity, a paradox merchants love. A temple scribe overseas unloading with the theatrical boredom of a man who knows his seal can stop the show. He checks for rot, measures lengths with a rope that is measured because he says so, and chalks numbers on ends with a flourish. The crew groans, but nobody rebels. When a city is thirsty for beams, bureaucracy is tolerable in a corner courtyard. A broker sits with 2 strangers and an interpreter. They drink beer because beer is the only language not mispronounced here. The deal is lapis for grain, with a goat thrown in because the broker's wife likes milk and the merchant's boy wants to impress. A girl whose father measures suitors in animals. They bargain in circles. The interpreter keeps the loops aligned. At the end, everyone feels cheated and everyone smiles. That's how you know it worked. A customs officer near the gate pretends not to see a small bundle slip from a donkey's pack into a boy's hands. Who knows which alley won't look yet? Smuggling is not failure of law. It's an accessory to law, a fee people pay to avoid fees. The officer will get his cut when he needs a roof tile replaced. The boy will get caught in a season when the budget is tighter. The system breathes through these tiny transgressions, like a flute through a crack. Storms discipline the hubris out of schedules. A squall kicks the river white, and a boat flips at the bend where it always flips. You stand on the bank with everyone else, and count heads, and count jars, and count the cost. A man's cylinder seal bobs once, twice, and vanishes. Somewhere downstream, a child will find it on a muddy bar and roll it on his mother's bread like a king. His mother will swat his hand and then hide the seal in a jar because power, even drowned, is still power at sunset. The caravan returns, the way dreams returns, lightly late, slightly smaller. They come with copper that will be hammered into argument, with stone that will be carved into gods, with stories that make the world feel bigger and therefore safer. They also come with a sickness that a single sneeze taught to travel. Traders are bridges, and bridges carry everything in the market. A woman sells shells, pierced and strung, white with a blush in their whorls. Dillman, she says, like a spell. She charges too much, and you pay it because somewhere in your chest, a place you've never seen makes room for itself. You put the shells to your ear and hear the sea because your brain is an accomplice. You tie the strand around your wrist, and for a day you belong to a geography you cannot spell. Before sleep, you inventory risk. Storms, thieves, customs, rot, distance, time, bandits, boredom, hubris. You inventory reward. Timber beams across your ceiling, copper biting dirt into duty, beads at your sister's throat, oil in lamps for winter seraphs, wheat against lean, news against fear. Trade is not greed here. It's insurance. A diversified city survives. You roll onto your side and think about your world's trade containers, moving like dominoes on seas, mapped so precisely you can track a ship by an app while you oversteep tea. Same logic, same gamble, same prayer that the people you will never meet did their part far away. Civilization is the trust fall you perform with strangers. You sleep and dream of boats, stitched with tressinu and men singing to set their oar strokes, of donkeys blinking in twilight while bells tint the air, of seals pressed into wet clay with rolled identities, of a city surviving because it learned to ask the horizon for help. Next, empires roll in Sargon's audacity, Naram Sin's horned crown, and the first time one ruler. Many people's changes the math of your morning. Then the fall, the Gushans, the dark stretch where canals forget what they're for, and the comeback asterisk. You wake to a city that still smells like itself. Yeast and clay and sweat and smoke, but the voice from the ziggurat is different. The accent is northern. The banner on the pole is not your city's animal anymore. It's a star. What does empire smell like? A little like bronze, polish, and new orders. The story arrives first as gossip in the market, then as proclamation in the courtyard, then as a man on a donkey, with guards who don't bother to look impressed. Sargon, the name travels faster than carts and sticks harder than seal wax. Cupbearer turned king, servant turned storm. The tale arrives with embroidery, as tales do. basket baby set, adrift like a prophecy. Gardener's foster son, a rise launched by luck, or by boldness, or by the simple math of being the one who never flinches. You don't know which version is true. The city knows which version wins. The one with an army attached. Empire doesn't knock. It inventories. A new scribe with a new tablet and a new haircut stands in your store quarter and asks questions that feel like the beginning of attacks. How many jars of oil can the temple guarantee in late harvest? How many oxen can the city spare for roadwork if the road leads north? How many men can your Lugal call without the fields blushing? The answers turn into numerals that turn into policy far away. Somebody in our card will read your barley-like weather and decide how loudly to smile. Sargon does not raise. He's Governor Sensi, but now prefaced with the empire's authority arrive in pairs. One local who speaks your mother's vowels, and one Akkadian who writes reports that will make it upriver in a leather bag stamped with the king's seal. They check weights and measures, and make the mina is the mina a phrase with teeth. Your trader grumbles, and then quietly thrives, because a measure that means the same thing in Kish and Akkad and Mari buys a city-sized kind of trust. Commerce, long a miracle, becomes habit. There's a postal system now, a relay of runners and donkeys and way stations that repaint distance into something the king can cross in days instead of seasons. A boy you knew fast feet, faster grin gets, recruited to carry clay letters in reed envelopes, plugs of wet mud sealing secrets under tiny rolled gods. He trains to read the country by smell, which station burns dung, which station burns cedar, which station means the river is close because the mosquitoes travel in a cloud you can hear. He comes home after his first circuit with legs like carved wood and eyes that have learned how big the world is, and how small a person feels in it. Soldiers garrison in your courtyard's cousin, large rooms, turned into barracks, an armory where the storehouse used to keep spare jars. Their shield wall drills in the square until the rhythm lives in your bones against your will. They are not unkind. They just have a job that requires ignoring the furniture of people's lives. When they leave, the floor remembers them as scuffs. Your child mimics their cadence with a stick and a pot lid, and you pretend you don't flinch. Language shifts first in the places that keep score. The temple reads Sumerian in ceremony and prays in it too old, sounds soaked in oil and blood and certainty. But the governor's court writes Akkadian when it tallies tribute. You hear the bilingual announcements like a duet where one voice carries melody ritual and the other carries beat policy. On street corners, kids mash both tongues into a slang that makes elders click their tongues and secretly smile. Your sign painter adds a second line to his placard. And now beer is two words that mean the same solution to thirst. A tax called Bala arrives, wearing a logic you can't argue with. Each province contributes on a rotating schedule, so the burden is shareable and the storehouses are never simultaneously hollow. You feel it when it's your month. Extra audits, extra carts to the river, extra prayers that the tally will match the promise. When it's not your month, the market breathes big. Balance, Empire says, is a kind of mercy. You believe it on even days. Sargon publishes victories like a brand, cities taken, kings washed with the water of his feet, a boast beloved of men who win often enough to confuse cruelty with poetry. He doesn't just conquer, he roots. Trade lines redraw themselves like rivers after a flood. Lapis arrives smoother, copper arrives more often, wood arrives in lengths that make architects ambitious. The ziggurat gets new stairs. You get a new door beam that doesn't remember termites. Empire's argument is that everybody's house improves when one man's house becomes the house. You meet an Akkadian craftsman in the market who sharpens blades to the edge where a breath can decide their temper. He jokes in Sumerian with an accent heavy as a jar, and after 3 cups he says your words are old and beautiful, with a sincerity that makes you trust him more than the governor who said it yesterday like a line. He's saving to send for his family. His children will grow up where your children do, with mixed vowels and 2 gods' names for rain. Colonialism by marriage, you think. And then you remind yourself, marriage is too small a word for how people actually live. Naram-Sin succeeds Sargon grandson. War-honed, audacious in that specific way power learns to be after it watches itself get inherited twice. He declares himself divine, puts on a horned crown, and dares the gods to complain. Some do. Priests whisper about sacrilege with the formal outrage that doubles as job security. Others mutter that it's efficient to keep your god in the palace where you can schedule meetings. He stomps rebellions, the way a man stomps a fire that jumped a hearth. He carves a victory stele that shows him taller than the mountains he climbed to win. Spear mint clean enemies so small you pity them. Children learn his posture the way they learned the work song. Your market learns his appetite. Your son comes home with a toy crown cut from a reed mat, and you let him keep it because the opposite lesson can wait. Not everything improves. Conscription eats boys you counted on for ditch season. A governor's cousin starts a shipping business, and suddenly your cousin's boat gets inspected twice as often as it did last year. A temple official with a smooth beard explains that the empire's road crews will repair the road after planting, then after harvest, then after the festival, and your donkey trips every 3rd morning in a rut that doesn't care about the calendar, but on a night when rain hammered the city so hard the streets were souped by breakfast and the canal's eyelid threatened to peel. A column of soldiers you thought were built for parade showed up with red bundles and muscle and turned disaster into a story you tell in the present tense. They came, you say, and they lifted. Somewhere far away, the king calls this order. You call it, we didn't drown. What's it like to live inside someone else's map? You learn to navigate. You learn to love the things that got bigger wood, copper, rumors, and manage the things that got smaller autonomy, the number of decisions that feel like they're yours. You keep a small piece of your voice under your tongue in a place nobody can tax. The empire teaches your city a useful trick, scale. Weights that way the same in cities that hate each other. Laws that rhyme across rivers. A calendar that lets a caravan depart on a day with a name that means the same thing to valleys away. It also teaches the limits of bigness, when the king is a week's ride away. Bribes sprout like weeds in the cracks of roads he paved by the time news arrives, carried in by a runner with dust. Eyebrows that Naram-Sin's luck stumbled in a mountain pass, and the Gushans set their own flag on a stolen wall. You have learnt to hate and bless the same word, empire with the same breath. Hate the arrogance. Bless the scale. Pray your ditch crew remembers their training, regardless of who prints the seals. You sleep that night to the metallic whisper of soldiers, sharpening blades under stars. You've seen the city survive city-state wars. This feels wider, sloppier, like a river flooding out of its ditch and deciding it wants to tour the neighborhood. You touch the door beam gifted by a cedar you'll never meet, and you whisper to the trees, God, and to your rivers, God, and to the God of bureaucracy, and to anyone listening, hold. They don't hold. Part 11 is the long, low Arquin. The ditches rot, the gods go quiet, and families become boats in the same storm. It's ugly and honest and necessary, because resilience isn't a poem until it bleeds. Asterisk collapse is not a bang. It's a calendar. The first thing you notice is silt, where silt shouldn't be. The second is a canal bank, slumped and unrepaired, a week longer than your grandparents would have tolerated. The third is the market sound thinner, higher, and nervousness pretending to be noise. After that, the list is national. Fewer caravans, more rumors. Fewer priests at rites, more empty bowls for offerings. Fewer soldiers, more men with blades who are not employed by anyone you can petition. The Gushans descend like weather from the Zagros names you haven't learned, paired with knives you understand instinctively. At first, they are raids that steal at night and turn torch into punctuation. Then they arrive at noon, in squads large enough for swagger. They don't speak your language except in the nouns that move fast. Strain, goat, girl. You hate them for the cruelty you see and for the incompetence you feel. They do not understand ditches. They understand tribute. They take, they don't maintain, and a city can survive attacks. It cannot survive neglect. Scribes copy less. There's nothing to record that isn't a list of losses. The boys who were learning wedges at the temple school learn ropes instead, or learn the routes to marshes where the reeds grow thick enough to hide in, where a person can become a rumor and live as one. The temple's storerooms echo. The choir sings fewer notes, and more of them with a sound like hunger. The goddess statues do not empty themselves, but the priests eat less elaborately. People notice, then stop noticing, because noticing takes calories they don't have in the fields. A different enemy eats stealthily. Salt creeps into soil the way debt creeps into a household. A little more, then a little more. Then suddenly everything costs twice what it did and yields half. Irrigation without enough drainage pulls salt up by capillary and sets it at the roots like a little crown of later. Barley is tough and stubborn and proud. Wheat is pickier, delicate as a prince. Barley manages. Wheat sulks, fades, leaves. Your bread forgets what it used to taste like and pretends not to mind. A year comes when the levee near Ward. 2 breaks in the night and nobody has the rope and human luxury to fix it by noon. So it stays broken and turns a field into a small, useless lake. The lake breeds mosquitoes. The mosquitoes learn your children's names. You watch your neighbor's wife light a prayer and a lamp in the daytime, and both feel like begging the sun to be a different star. You understand the bruised logic behind sacrifice in a way that made you roll your eyes 5 years ago. Desperation is a translator fluent in extreme proposals. Law gets blurry. Elders still sit on bricks and adjudicate boundary stones with their boots. But now a man with a sharper knife and younger wrists can appeal decisions by performing violence. The end's chair is still high. The respect it commanded is low. People who always paid fines begin to calculate the odds of running. The city remains a city in that people remain close together. It stops being a city in that rules are negotiable with the wrong negotiators. Bandits return old courtesies. They leave caravans alone on festival days and take double the week after. They split the road with a polite sign in 2 languages that says tithe and charge less than the new. Gushan governor's cousin charges at the gate. Your trader shrugs. At least the bandit delivers a receipt. Cynicism is a spice that keeps rotten news from stinking too loud. You grow older fast. Your mother's hands become ropes. Your father's back pays in staggered installments for the fields he coaxed for 40 years to do. Something they weren't sure they wanted to do. Your own shoulder learns whether hours before the sky does. Children play fewer games that require counting. Knucklebones sit in dust. Stories get told with a little more bite and a little less wonder. People leave. Houses harden into shells and then become brick quarries for the ones who can stay. A family that fed yours when your firstborn arrived pulls their door reed tight and heads south toward marshes, where fish at least still believe in being fish. Another heads north toward a cousin in a town whose goddess has a new name and a kinder ration schedule. You hate them for going and envy them for moving. You tell yourself this is temporary. You count years on your palm and run out of fingers. The Gushan you meet in the market one morning looks as tired as you feel. He is not a monster. He is a man hired by a man who pays him in coin he knows won't be honored in 5 seasons. He tries to buy beer and leaves a handful of shiny that the brewer does not recognize as money. She takes 2 pieces with a screw of her mouth and gives him half a jar. He smiles a little. It's the first time you've seen his face do that. You almost return it. The day isn't strong enough to lift that weight. Temple rites shrink. The high priest once poured oil so fine it smelled like gardens. Now he lights stubs and calls it incense. He asks the gods for mercy, and you hear in his voice the echo of asking for time off from a boss who has forgotten your name. The choir hits notes they can afford. The god statues look like debtors, pretending not to make eye contact with the lender. You start to rehearse a prayer to a deity called maintenance, and stop because you have grown superstitious. About jokes, you learn to celebrate tiny victories with the sincerity you used to reserve for festivals. A canal section held a whole month without collapsing. A cart of timber made it past the pass with only 1 tithe. The baby down the lane lived through fever. The granary door got a new bar. A neighbor found a way to leach salt by flooding and draining and flooding and praying, and it worked on 1 small patch. And you threw a party for the patch and fed it beer. Rumor walks faster when systems don't. You to Hengel, a name from the south, a name in your mouth like a small spark. A man who remembers ditches and also knows how to put fear in men who forgot. He speaks like a farmer and plans like a fox. He wins a fight at a bend in a river you can draw with your finger. And the news makes even sour beer taste like festival brew. The Gushan garrison looks at each other with the expression soldiers get when the storm they were promised turns out to be a different one. You are older than you meant to be when a column disciplined. Fed human enters your city not to take but to repair. They carry reed bundles like gifts. They greet the ditch with a familiarity that feels like prayer's twin. Their leader isn't you. He's a man with his orders. He's enough. He reads a proclamation that is half policy, half apology from the future for the years you just had. You cry for the first time since your father's burial, and you pretend the tears are sweat. It does not snap back. It rebuilds. Rebuilding is slower than collapse because you are replacing something with something, not something with nothing. Canals get sections in order of triage, not fame. Storehouses fill in weird ratios because grain is not a loyal ally. Law stands up from its brick and stretches and tries to remember how to object. The priest's voice low-key returns resonance. Children learn to run games again and cheat and argue and invent justice in laughter. But scars remain. Salt in soil is a note at the bottom of every ledger. People you loved left and did not write because writing costs and because their new city did not want to share their hope back to the old one. You keep making lists with more blank lines than entries and tell yourself blank is potential. On even days you believe you, the day your city officially celebrates the Gushini's exit. You stand at the corner shrine with a shell from Dilmun tied at your wrist from a time when the world seemed wide. And you touch the shell and feel it's cool. And you say aloud, to the gods and to the ditch and to the farmer and to the woman who still boils water before washing a cut. We are still here. Staying is an art. Survival is not a plot. Twist it's a practice. The comeback gets a name you're 3. Yonamu writes rules. Shulgi runs marathons. The ziggurats rise with straight edges again. Sumerian returns as the language of ceremony. And then because entropy still reads the calendar, the end of the end. Finally, legacy. How your clock and your math and your maps say thank you to people you'll never meet. Asterisk. Rebirth comes in the plain brown wrapper of administration. Your Namu takes the south like a man reclaiming a workshop rather than a temple. He does not glitter. He inventories. He writes a law code that reads less like vengeance and more like math. Penalties pinned to categories. Fines measured in silver by weight. Bias declared blatantly free men. Slaves, wives, this is still Sumer, not a utopia and thus at least visible enough to argue with. He orders canals repaired in an order that offends priests and pleases fields. He requires road crews and pays them in rations that arrive when promises say they should. The ziggurat at your begins again. Stairways straight, terraces crisp. Brick faces looped with reeds and bitumen in a pattern your uncle calls. Beautiful engineering until the priest coughs. Politely, and your uncle adds, for the gods, the temple becomes a supply chain with incense. Storehouses hum. The Bela tax rotates with enough predictability that men you trust reinvest in orchards. You buy dates that taste like the color you always wished sunset would be. Shorgi Yonamu's son inherits a machine humming on all cylinders and decides to race it. He's brilliant, exhausting, and one haircut away from being a scandal in any century. He brags in tablets that sound like a mixtape. He runs from city to city in a single day. Couriers run for him, of course. Kings don't get shin splints. He inspects schools and corrects students' wedges with the intimacy of a teacher who still remembers the feel of clay. He standardizes curricula so the future accountants will agree on what it looks like in different provinces. He composes hymns in which he is both subject and object in a way that makes you roll your eyes and then admit it's catchy. He beefs up the Bela system until it clicks like a loom. Province A pays in barley this month. Province B in wool. Province C in copper. The treasury writes IOUs you actually want to collect. The city's rhythm regularizes. Ditch season, harvest, levee repair, festival, audit, repeat. Craftsmen achieve that delicious second-order excellence that comes only in the third generation after disaster. The potter's slip is now a signature. The weaver's selvage is an essay. The seal carver fits more myth into a centimeter than a bard can fit in an hour. Language does its own restoration. People speak Akkadian in markets and marriage proposals and jokes because empire carved its vowels into home. But in schools and temples, Sumerian returns like a grandfather at dinner. Beloved, honored, slightly hard of hearing, the stories better every year, regardless of their relationship to reality. Students memorize Sumerian hymns even when their mothers scold them in Akkadian. Bilingualism becomes more than convenience. It becomes identity. You switch tongues mid-sentence the way a musician switches modes to change a mood without changing the beat dot in the scribal quarter. Young men and a few exceptional women copy out older compositions with care that borders on religious. They are preserving a language and also building a canon. The Sumerian king list appears like a genealogy on steroids. Kings that reigned for impossible spans. Disasters that served as punctuation. Cities that passed the crown like a hot loaf. It isn't history as you would want it. It is legitimacy with a bibliography, and it works. People like to feel attached to a long rope. Asterisk for a while, your city forgets hunger. That may be the most dangerous sentence in any era. Salt still wicks up in fields that refuse to drain, and barley keeps showing up tired. And wheat ghosts the market less often than you'd prefer. But the system hums loud enough to drown the hiss. Amorite tribes nudge in from the west and get hired as labor or guards, because everyone knows the math of assimilation is cheaper than the math of war. To the east, Elam watches with the patience of a creditor who prefers to collect with a smile. You get older, and none of the aging is about empire knees that resent ladders, back that grumbles like a stagehand, patience that learned how to account for a neighbor's grief before deciding to be angry. Your daughter marries a baker whose calloused hands are soft when they hold your granddaughter under the moon. Your son notches a seal with lions and a shepherd and insists the shepherd is him. You give your reed mat to your niece when she sets up her own household, and she cries like you gave her gold, because sleep is wealth you only recognize once. Asterisk. Shulgi dies. Kings do. His successors keep the calendar, but not the charisma. Bureaucrats multiply like scaffolding essential, but unsightly when you start to count how much of the building they've become. A general decides a border is negotiable, and Elam decides it is not. The North stops sending what it promised on its months, citing bandits, floods, poets, anything but we prefer keeping. The Amorites stop being guests and start being landlords. Taxes try to adjust. Crops refuse to cooperate. You feel the cadence change like a drummer missing a beat he's hit all his life. Ibiston, last of the line, earns sympathy he can't spend. He inherits a ledger with red handwriting and tries to write black on it by decree. The year the granary records empty shelves next to full prayers. You know the end of the political story even before it gets written on a tablet. Nobody will have time to bake. Elam comes. The month that should have been festival becomes inventory of ruins. A lament is composed long, carved, terrible, beautiful, that names the streets by their habitual joy and then lists the bodies that lay there instead. You will never forget that poem. You will forget the names of some kings. That is as it should be. Your own end is smaller and kinder. Age takes you by the hand the way a parent takes a child across a busy lane, slow, insistent, seeing more than you can. Your last view of your city from the roof is not tragedy. It is roofs, smoke, a canal with the gloss of late sun, voices arguing about prices, a child dragging a toy cart by a cord and singing a work song he learned while watching his aunt rake grain to dry on a mat. You fall asleep before the stars are all the way on. Your family wakes you to the last breath and tell you things you achieved that you do not remember achieving, and things you failed at, that suddenly feel like part of the achievement. They wash you with water boiled and cool the healer's habit turned ritual and sing the hymn that taught them to measure grief in measures. What remains? Ziggurats erode. That's mud's political affiliation. Cities are taken and retaken. Languages climb on each other's backs to see farther, but the through lines don't break. Sumerian base 60 becomes the secret gear in every clock face. The reason your day has ways of dividing that feel natural, because a boy counting finger segments under a teacher's stick made them so. The sexagesimal circle, you annotate with protractors in a room that smells like pencil shavings, and dread is Sumerian technology at full swagger. Cylinder seals become signatures, become logos, become avatars, become whatever tiny pictorial summary you use to say this is me in the feeds of your century. Cuneiform turns into alphabets that turn into fonts, and the wet clay of a tablet becomes your glass-lit rectangle. Your thumb is a stylus. Your posts are baked not in kilns but in servers that pretend to remember forever. They do not. Even forever is a rented word. Public argued with into Babylon wearing Hammurabi's hat, and then into Assyria wearing iron, and then into Rome wearing marble, and then into parliaments and courtrooms. You've seen on television where a judge asks for order and means the same thing a priest meant when he asked for water. The idea that justice should be written and the poor should at least have a version of an imperfect one is Sumerian and neighborly and not done being refined. The Epic of Gilgamesh, expanded, translated, mourned, memmed, becomes the first long poem to tell a man that immortality isn't a product. It is work done well and a city loved and a friend kept as long as the math allows. You read it at 20 and think, bro, calm down. You read it at 50 and put the book down and look at the people you get and think, may I'd be a decent shovel for your ditch. A habit of watching the sky as if it were a ledger god kept grows out of temple roofs and becomes math that lets you land objects on rocks that don't belong to you. You still whisper at eclipses even though an app told you the second to expect them, because ore is not an error science corrects. It is a resource science mines. Beer stops being thick and sweet and becomes crisp and bitter and served too cold in bars with televisions. And people still lift a glass to mark survival and say things they could have said in barley. Soap isn't grey and grainy anymore. It's scented and smooth and comes with a promise on the label to restore something in you. But the chemistry is the same. Fat plus alkali plus heat equals a minor miracle that saves lives more than temples ever did. Most of all, the idea of city as a voluntary problem. Let's gather too close, argue constantly, cooperate more often than feels fair, and in exchange trade loneliness for a wider pantry, a wider songbook, a wider sky. That's Sumerian. That's you every time you take a bus, because taking a bus is a group math problem that proves out so tonight. Wherever you are, in a studio apartment with a plant you're bribing into being a tree, in a house that creaks familiar, in a dorm with voices in the hall, on a couch that became a raft and saved you this year, look at a clock, any clock. Watch the minute hand jump. 60 beats made a minute because a boy in a clay-walled room counted finger segments while a teacher scowled with love. Put your palm up. Count your own segments. Smile. You are an animal who inherited math and law and bread and song, and the right to tell stories about people who told stories before you could spell story. If this journey hit you, if you felt the heat off the canal and the cool off the beer, if you heard a lyre in your ribcage, if you recognized your neighbors 3,000 miles and 5,000 years away, tap like so the algorithm remembers to bring you back here. Share this with someone who calls you when their own ditch breaks. And drop a comment with your city and the time on your clock. Tell me which part of Sumer felt most like your street. Tell me which tool plow, wheel, soap, Celia weak, secretly ran on. Who were the Sumerians? They were us, early and dusty and brave, counting, digging, loving, arguing, inventing, failing, fixing, singing, and leaving messages in clay for strangers. You're the stranger who got the message. Pass it on, asterisk.